Hi, my name is Mike Jungbluth. I guess you guys saw my reel, and I've got a bunch of your questions. So I'm going to try and look in the camera and make this not look weird, which I'm already failing at miserably. So, first question.
What do you think is the next step in the way we control our games?
That's a good question. I think motion controls are not as successful as people had initially had hoped. I think a lot of that is because I think it's really natural to use motion controls, like with the Wii and the Kinect and stuff like that. But as far as the games recognizing those, I think is a little off. And I think in getting the feedback from the game as a player is off, right? The best form of motion control I ever used was in this game called Child of Eden for the 360 with the Kinect. And what was cool was you could take the controllers and put them, like if you have cargo pockets, put them in the pockets of your cargo pants, and use the vibrate function so that while you were using the game to shoot lasers and stuff, or if you got hit by lasers, it would vibrate the controllers, so you'd get that feedback. That tactile feedback that I think so many Kinect games are missing. So, as for the future, I think better voice recognition. I think I think maybe some facial recognition would be cool. But I still think there's something about having clear, crisp, concise input methods for the player, like through a controller, for example, that I think is going to take a long time for that to go away. Even with touchscreens, I think. There's something intuitive about sliding your finger across the screen, right, or tapping on it. But that's still a very you interacting with a plane of glass, as opposed to you actually interacting with it in a kind of a fully 3D way. That's still a very 2D type method. Yeah, honestly, that type of stuff I haven't really put a whole lot of thought into. But it's really important, and I'm excited to see what does come next.
Do you specifically work in game design?
Specifically, I'm an animator, but with game development, you work really closely with all of the departments. So I work really closely with designers in figuring out what types of things the characters should be doing in a scene or in a moment or in a gameplay mechanic. And then oftentimes I work with programmers when the thing the designer and I wants to do doesn't have the tech in order to actually be able to implement it into the game. But then we also work really closely with concept artists, with modelers, with the sound effects, with the particle effects type artists. It's all really integrated, at least at the best studios, and it seems to be what all studios are doing now. The idea of kind of keeping everybody off in their own little thing and doing their little widget and then putting it down the conveyor belt really ends up leading to disjointed characters and moments in games. So everyone's pretty much realized now you need to kind of bring all the departments together and really have that overlap, especially as games get bigger budgets and better visuals and just bigger games in general. It's really easy and almost necessary to get specialized people to work really closely on one thing. So unless they're actively, integrated with everybody, it can get really messy really quickly. So, yeah.
Did you do any animation on Black Ops 2?
No, I did not. I worked on Black Ops 1. I was at Raven Software, and we helped pitch in on some of the stuff for Black Ops 1. So I was on Black Ops 1 for about 6 months. Before I left Raven and went out to Warner Brothers.
What's a typical workday like for you?
A typical day for me is I get into work. I usually have every morning a meeting with the designers and programmers and other artists and stuff that I work with. As far as the right now I'm working on player combat stuff. Every morning we get together and we look at what we all did the day before. And we critique it and we say, oh, that looks cool. Oh, that doesn't look as cool. Oh, hey, did you try this? So we do that, and that's usually about like 15 minutes to a half an hour. And then from that point on, my day is a mix of actually animating, of talking to designers and programmers and figuring out new ways of maybe trying something new, or fixing something that broke, or trying to make something better that just kind of got in as a proof of concept, and now we need to actually make it look and function the best way it can. And then every once in a while you have a meeting pop up. Every once in a while you have another animator say, hey, I don't know, can you help me act this out? So then we use our fake weapons and run around and hit each other with them, and then videotape it so that we can use it as blackmail, and reference, I guess, too, but mostly blackmail. And then, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. It's pretty open. I mean, you do try to spend a large chunk of your day actually animating, but as you kind of grow up in seniority, as you kind of level up, as it were, at a certain, it gets harder to balance the actual creation of animation and then like meetings and managing things and all that type of stuff. So yeah, so a typical workday, I would say it's like 85% animation, 80% animation, and then another 20% of putting out fires and meetings and stuff like that. But as you become like more senior, or as you become a lead animator, that balance shifts quite a bit.
Is it fun in your company?
It is, yeah, it's fun making games. I'm not gonna lie. Like, every time we have a meeting where we have to get together and be like, this giant monster, what are we gonna do with it? And you realize that you've got a 1 hour meeting with a bunch of adults, acting like children, trying to figure out the coolest ways for a giant monster to react and act in the world, and the ways that the player should interact with them. It's pretty awesome. On top of that, like, there's always games being played. Everyone there is usually like really relaxed. It has a good sense of humor, so everyone's usually playing jokes on each other. And it's definitely not as ridiculous as like a movie or something would make you think it is, but it definitely has its perks. On the on the backside, like, it's also a lot of work, especially as a project goes further towards its deadline, and gets closer and closer and closer. You start to work really, really long hours, and it becomes pretty common that you're working 12 plus hours a day, 6-7 times a week, and you work hard and you play hard, and hopefully you find that balance. But for as much fun as it is, it can also be just as demanding. So it's not running around and shooting each other with Nerf guns for 8 hours a day. You're expected to work just as hard as you were shooting each other with Nerf guns.
How did you know you wanted to do this job?
The first time I realized I thought games could be really, really awesome as far as animation was this game Mark of Cree on the PlayStation 2. Before that, like, I always really liked playing games, ever since I was a kid, but my initial focus was to try and get into comic books, because for me I really wanted to tell a story and focus on cool scenes, and or like do storyboards, because I was really interested in kind of like the big idea, as opposed to like a film or something with the idea of like really laboring over one shot in one piece. I wanted to kind of get into all parts of it. But seeing Mark of Cree and the great animation that it had there, I was like, wow, games really can have amazing animation, because up to that point I always thought they kind of had crappy animation. And I can still animate, which is kind of where my skill is, but get to do cool, big, fun stuff. So kind of from that point on, it was always like, oh, that would be something that I'd be really interested in. And then when I moved out to Los Angeles with a friend, a game opportunity came up. And when I interviewed and talked to him, it just seemed like a lot of fun. And ever since that first day of making games and getting that sensation of, holy crap, this thing I just animated, this character that I just made this motion for, or this action for, this performance for, once I was able to put it in game and like pick up a controller and play that or interact with that, it was over. Like, that's all I've wanted to do since. And as I get more into games, the development side of it and the game design side of it, my focus is even more like less on the specific animation and more on the conversation that the game has between the player and all the possibilities and how animation can help influence that and bring a lot more emotion and performance and storytelling and acting and physicality and all that stuff. So yeah, I love games.
Where did you start with your animation? Like, you had to start somewhere before you are where you are now.
This is perfect because I was like, maybe I should record something that talks about my work history. So I got started in animation, like I said, out in Los Angeles. Originally, I moved out there to work on some film stuff because that's where my friend was working. But a game opportunity came up first, and it was working on a PSP game for 300, the movie, the PSP game version of it, and I was on that for a year. I did some player character stuff, some enemies. I got to do some character designs, some cinematics, like kind of all over the thing. It was a really small team of about 15 people making the game, and it was a PSP, so the visuals and the technology was actually a little bit older. So it was lower poly, and it didn't have tons of it didn't have finger controls or facial controls or all these little details that, as an animator, it's really easy to get distracted by. So it was a really good way to start out because it made me really focus on strong posing, strong silhouettes, really clear actions, and really make sure I understood the timing necessary for games, and how to sell it without kind of all the bells and whistles. From there, I moved from Los Angeles to Austin, Texas, to work on the Incredible Hulk game for the last movie a few years ago, and that was for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. And that one was really great because that was like that next step of, okay, now I've got finger controls, now I have some facial controls, now I've even got like muscle controls for like biceps and pecs and like calf muscles and stuff, which was awesome. And that was a great experience because it was like, okay, take everything I learned from PSP and now learn how to put that extra amount of polish on it, right? And it was awesome, and that was a great experience. And the lead that I had there was a really strong animator, so I was able to learn a lot about just, again, like continuing my craft as an animator, which was great. After that game, I wanted to move back to cold weather because the heat and I do not get along. So I moved up to Wisconsin to work at Raven Software. While there, I worked on Wolfenstein, Singularity, which you can see the poster of behind me, and Call of Duty Black Ops. I also worked on a couple demos there that ended up not getting released. And that one was great because that was where I really got exposed to two different things that I've really come to love and appreciate. The first of which was mocap, which I thought for sure I was going to hate. In school, when I went to school with your teacher Chris, Mr. Kozak, was I not supposed to say the first name? I don't know how that teacher stuff works. Sorry. All I did was 2D animation, and I hated 3D animation, let alone the idea of mocap, which just removes all of the animator's passion and performance, and it was like a 4-letter word. Going to Raven, where they had their own giant mocap studio with like 36 cameras or something crazy like that. It was like a whole big space, and we had like our own mocap actors that were always there. They used a lot of mocap, and initially when I was hired, I was doing like keyframe animation on monsters and bosses and stuff like that. But at a certain point, like, you're going to have to use mocap because that's what they use there. And at first I was really hesitant, but once I was able to get into the mocap room and actually direct the actors and see that process, that like my eyes just opened up, like, wow, this is great, because now I get to try a bunch of different performances in a bunch of different ways and get that data back directly, so I can cut it up and put it into game and try it out right away and see, like, oh, that was really cool if I have them, instead of like shoot the gun and run, maybe if I have them run first, shoot, and then run again, maybe that feels different, maybe that looks different. What if I have them try this really angry and like abrupt with their actions, or what if I have them be a little bit slower and a little bit more relaxed? All these were things that I could try very quickly with mocap, and see in game, and then get to iterate on and play with and stuff. And that was awesome. I loved that. So I ended up really falling in love with mocap. Like, I still love keyframe animation. Don't get me wrong, it's great, and that's all I actually use now at my current job is ZeniMax. But I also love mocap, and I think each one has their own very specific benefits. That in my perfect world, I'd have the ability to choose whichever one I wanted in the best case scenario of both. So that's what I really found and fell in love with at Raven. And then second that I really started to get more involved in was game design. There were some really strong, a couple of really strong designers there that I really admired. And talking to them got me really interested in the idea of, yes, I'm an animator, but before that, and more importantly, when it comes to games, I'm a game developer. So there are moments where, as an animator, I have to give up some of the control in the performance of the character, or the way the character moves, or with what speed or how it moves. And I have to surrender that not only to the game designers, but to the players. And it's really important for me as an animator then to not only understand those, but be able to use those as tools in making the overall performance of characters and players come together. And all of a sudden my brain started to click in all these different ways of oh, well, I can apply animation principles to this game design thing, or now that I know about this game design theory, I can use that in making this animation better. And so a bunch of different light bulbs went off when I was at Raven, which was great. But after working on Call of Duty there, it wasn't really the type of games that I wanted to be making. So I went out to Seattle to work for Warner Brothers on some Lord of the Rings, because I thought that'd be a lot of fun. And I got to work on Lord of the Rings War in the North out there. I also did some work on Gotham City Imposters, and some work on a game that hasn't been released yet. And that one was really great because I got to start to take everything I'd learned at Raven and really get to become more active in it in the way that I would want to do it, right? So I would, a lot of the stuff that they were doing, a lot of the actors and the people that were acting out the mocap stuff at WB were really strong physical actors as far as action and karate and stuff like that, and martial arts, but they didn't have as much acting sensibilities. So I would get to go in there and kind of shake things up and be like, okay, now really scream, be vocal with it, or try this one blindfolded because I want to see what you would do just instinctually, and just by audio cues, and really start to play with the idea of performance there as opposed to just the physicality of the motion. And so that was great. And then also I really got to start to get more involved with the design side of things. So they would have hey, this is here's a monster, and we'll just write the name. They just wrote the name down because design had just said we want this type of monster. And I would get to sit down with the combat designers and say, okay, let's really figure this out before any concept artist has done it, before anything is done. What do we want out of this? And really get to start to think of, okay, well, if I make it move like this, how's that going to affect the way that you engage it, the way that you fight it, the way that you run from it, and the way that it comes at you, and all that fun interaction. So Warner Brothers was a really great place to kind of hone all these light bulbs that kind of had started to go off at Raven, and how to really apply them specifically to game development. After a little bit out there, I decided I wanted to move back to the East Coast when I had the opportunity to work on Elder Scrolls Online. And obviously Elder Scrolls is awesome, so how do you say no to that? And that is my long-winded answer as to what my history in the industry has been.
What 3 skills are important to your career?
I would say, I guess the 3 things that I kind of push for most, and I think that kind of set me off individually from either other animators or what I like to really focus on, are understanding game design is a big one. Really thinking about how animation can influence game design specifically, I think is an area that isn't as aware by either designers or animators, and that's an area that I like to really bridge the gap on. Really strong understanding of performance and thinking of beyond just the movement of something, the intent behind it. I think it's really easy as animators to get excited about that cool scene where like these two guys punch each other, or like a cinematic where something big and explosions and stuff are going off, because it's really fun to work on that big over the top stuff. But thinking about like something as important as the turns that a character makes is something I get really kind of excited about, because those are the moments that thought process is going on. There's a reason that that character is turning, and it's not, yeah, I mean, it's turning because chances are, like, in the game it says, oh, it needs to go from left to right. But in the mind of that character, like, every time you turn, it's because you are either changing your goal or you have a purpose for it. So the turn is actually the moment that you're kind of showing your hand a little bit, right? Because you're changing what you were doing before. And that change, anytime there's change in an action or an emotion, that's kind of a thinking process going on in the character. So that would be the second thing. And then I guess the third thing would be just the coming from 2D, having that real strong appreciation for 2D art, for comic books and all the storytelling that kind of goes in and to that. So I guess those would be my three things: game design, like transitional performance character, like a thinking process of characters, and then 2D background. But I think it changes for everybody. I mean, there are some people that I think their things would be, like really understanding rigging and modeling and those types of things, because that actually makes them a stronger animator, because they know how to use all parts of the all parts of the animal, as it were. All right, so I'm babbling now.
What snacks do you enjoy eating while working those long hours?
It's changed over the last year. I've gotten a lot healthier, because it's real easy to put on weight and be unhealthy when you're sitting at a computer all day, every day, making and playing video games. So it used to be tons of pizza and soda, and if there was Mountain Dew, I was going to drink it. If there was anything like gummy worms from Mike and Ike's or any of those really sugary things, I would eat the heck out of those too. Now I would say water, just tons of water, because that's really important. And I really like dried fruits and stuff, so dried cranberries and raisins and stuff like that. I mean, the reality is you're going to be sitting down all day, and it's really easy to eat all the junk food that game studios have. There's always just free soda. There's usually always some sort of cookies or candy, or I mean, every Friday we get donuts and stuff, and those things are delicious. But when you're just going to spend the next 10 hours sitting on your butt, it's going to catch up to you. It will. Even you. It's you.
And do you have much input about what goes into the game?
It really depends on how big the studio is, and kind of what your position is, right? So when I was on my first game of 15 people, even though I was the youngest person there, fresh out of school, no experience, because there was only 15 of us, I got really direct feedback on everything, because you want as many eyes looking at the stuff, you want critique, and when there was only two designers, those designers go outside of themselves to be hey, what do you guys think? So I found that I had a lot of control there, even though I didn't have a lot of experience, which was cool. And then say when I worked on the Hulk, it was a bigger team of about 100 people, and I was still only had about a year of experience, so the amount of feedback that I had in those things was a lot less. And then again, as I've moved up, I've been able to get more control on some of those things. Now with say Elder Scrolls or something, where we've got 250 plus people working on a giant game, and you have so many different areas of things that go on in an MMO, I found that you get a lot of control on the things that you're a part of, and then it's up to you to really make sure that you understand all the others, so that your piece can fit together. So I would say, as an animator, the things that you can get the most kind of input on would be concept art, because obviously we're the ones that are going to end up having to move it, and the modeling and stuff like that. So usually the parts before you want to be able to have some input in, so that it has you thinking about it beforehand, so by the time you get to it, you already have a bunch of ideas on what to do. And then obviously the things that come after you, you're influencing. So like sound and effects are directly influenced by the things that I animate. So, you know, obviously like I need their input, and then they need my input to make sure that the things I intended in the motion and the performance are carried through in sound and effects.
Did you work on any games that you were a fan of?
You know, I would say Elder Scrolls is a big one. I loved Skyrim. I hadn't really played any of the ones before it because I was kind of an art snob, and the animation in them wasn't as strong just because of the reality of the game. But with Skyrim, I think they finally had the ability to like really focus in on better animation. I loved Skyrim. Wolfenstein, I definitely loved growing up, and so that was really exciting to work on that franchise. A lot of the other games I'd worked on were licensed games like Hulk and 300 and stuff like that, which I geeked out a bit because I was a comic book nerd. But I think my favorite experience yet was probably working on Singularity, just because it was an entirely new idea. We didn't have anything else that we were able to pull from, so it was really up to us to come up with these new scenarios and these new characters. And it wasn't like with Hulk when they're like, oh, and now you're going to animate, Abomination or something. You're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go like nerd out a little bit on some Abomination stuff. You didn't have any of that, and it was really up to you to, influence your own decisions with your own ideas and stuff, which was awesome. So, yeah, I mean, I think at a certain point, like you become a fan of anything you're working on. You almost have to be, so that passion shows through in the game. Then and again, at like a certain point, you kind of get burned out with it, and you're like, I'm done with it. Like, I can imagine, working on a single series for like years and just really getting burned out on it, because you can really only take like so much of somebody's creation as your own for so long before you go, I have my own ideas, I want to do my own thing. Which I think was kind of some of my reason for not being as excited about working on Call of Duty, because so much of it had already been established, and there were so many expectations as to what it is you're supposed to do. It's really hard to kind of insert a lot of yourself into that, which I think is really important as a creator.
How long did it take for you to get to bigger companies from the start?
It was really kind of gradual, right? Like going from a team of 15 on PSP up into to the Hulk, and then Raven, I would say was that first opportunity. And so it took me a good 2.5 years before I got into Raven. But I think it changes for everybody. I know some people that right out of college get into like a bigger studio, and it really just comes down to knowing what it is that you want to do, like seeing what it is that studio is capable of, and making sure that you can create that level of work, right? And not everyone has the same path into breaking into games or comics or film or anything. Everyone kind of does it their own way. So just kind of find out what works best for you. Because I hadn't necessarily focused on wanting to make games when I was in college, I think it was really good that I started gradual and kind of worked my way up. As opposed to if I would have just been tossed in right from the beginning, I might have been like, holy crap, I don't understand how to do all this stuff yet, because I still had a very like film-focused idea of what animation should be. Yeah.
How do you stay sane while working? Because I know I'm going crazy already.
Yeah, it gets crazy. Like, I think the way you stay sane is by being able to separate yourself from it when you can, right? Finding ways to get away from it so that your brain can stop thinking about it specifically, which is really hard to do, especially when it's something that you're excited about and that you're very personally attached to, because your mind's always like, oh, I got to do that, I want to do that, I got to keep doing that. And it's really important for you to be like, no, for the next like half a day at least, like I've got to push it away, I got to go hang out with my friends, I got to go see a cool movie, I got to go out for a hike, ride my bike, whatever. Really do something that has nothing to do with it, And then what's crazy is you'll come back and you'll find out that you're refreshed. You've got all these new ideas. So even though you weren't specifically working on it, when you come back to it, you're probably going to be better off for it because your brain is fresh and your mind is fresh and your body is fresh and everything is ready to just like focus on it. And all of a sudden things start to click that you were like banging your head on before because you've got these clear eyes and this clear mind on it. So yeah, I mean, really, it's like it's that weird thing of, and a lot of studios are starting to figure it out too. Like, you can't just work longer on something and expect to get it done and for it to be better. You kind of need to work smart, and you kind of need to let people, take like an hour and be ridiculous and play a game or, shoot Nerf guns at each other, right? You kind of need that ability to go play. Because what you're making is play for other people, and if all it is work for you, then it's going to be hard for some of that not to influence the game itself and have moments where it becomes work for the player.
And how much time really goes into animating with the character or the game in general?
It changes. For characters, usually we try to do like one animation a day. That's kind of vague because like an idle animation might not take as long as like a run animation, which might not take as long as like a really complex attack animation. So again, it takes like it's different. Like for enemies, like a normal enemy might take a couple, 2-3 weeks or something to work on from start to finish as far as animation. But something like the player character, that can take the whole project sometimes, just because the amount of animations the player character needs is way more than an enemy that you encounter. Usually the way it works is overall in the game, there isn't a lot of animation at the beginning because they're just trying to figure out all the design of things. So what you give them is very small and limited. And then, so that's up through pre-production. So you really only need like maybe 1 or 2 animators in pre-production. And then you get full-on production where everything's like, okay, we know what we're doing, go. And then, the team starts to build up. Up until towards the end, like say up until about beta, and then you can have teams of in the double digits. I think the biggest team I ever had was on Singularity. At one point we had like 11 animators, and then usually once you get to the end of beta, and it's just bug fixing. A lot of the bug fixing is on programming and design, and then the team starts to like wind back down again. So, by the time you're done with beta and the game's locked, technically, like, as animators, we're not creating anything else. We're just there to help bug fix. So, if they're like, this, when you play this animation, you're moving outside your collision and you're running into a wall, just bring it back a little bit. Or, during this scripted sequence, this character, stays in this area too long or doesn't move on or hitches like this or something. And most of that's just putting out fires. So, you only need a couple people to do that.
What is your inspiration, or what was your inspiration to be an animator?
Yeah. So like I said, like originally I went to college to do comic books, but the college that I went to at Edinburgh had an animation program, and it was a state school, so it was a lot cheaper. So I said, well, animation is just like comic books, but with a lot more drawing. So this will be perfect. It's still telling a story and making characters move. And, it was kind of like with games, like that first moment that you see it moving, you go, oh, this is so much cooler than just like one drawing on a page. Like I'm actually making this thing move and feel like it's alive. And that was like the moment where I was like, I gotta do this. This is so much cooler like than anything else because it's a culmination of all the things that I love, but in a way that nothing else can be. So, yeah.
Hi. How many creative liberties do you get when you're working on an animation?
Usually we get a lot of liberty. The designer will say, hey, I need this attack to happen in 36 frames. I need it to actually hit the player, the enemy, or whatever on frame 12. But what it looks like when it's doing, I don't care. Like they might call it uppercut, but if you have a cooler idea, do it. And as long as it meets the design constraint and the design request, we're usually free to do whatever we want. Now, a lot of the times, we'll talk to them up front and be like, oh, is this supposed to be like a scary creature? Is it supposed to be a funny creature? Is it supposed to be a powerful creature, a weak creature, whatever? And then, we need to make sure that every action we create shows that and presents that. But the best places allow every department to have that creativity, because that's when you get like the most excitement out of the game, and that's when you can feel it the most in the game, because the people working on it have invested themselves in it and are passionate about it, and that passion shows through and then gets the player excited, whether they realize that's it or not.
Do you think Elder Scrolls Online will kill WoW?
I don't think any game needs to kill any other game. I think as long as people have fun playing a game, like that's all that really matters. I think a lot of like the idea of like, oh, this game has to be better than this game. I mean, some of it's just like sports teams, right? Like, I love the Steelers, or I love the Packers or Ravens or whatever. So I think there is like that sense of people getting really excited and identifying themselves with one project or one idea or one team or one game. But the reality of it is like, do you have fun playing it? Great. Does this other person have fun playing it? Great. Do you have fun playing both? Great. A lot of people put a lot of time and effort and love into the games that they make. For one to like kill another one is kind of sad, because they're all important.
Do you like lens flares?
Yes, I love lens flares. Only as much as I love like super saturated or super unsaturated like games that are just all brown. Just as much as I love games that are like way overexposed, kind of like Bloom. So like, see if I can like get close enough to my light so that it like, there we go, like look all that bloom on my face. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, lens flares.
How hard is it to put the actual animation in the final game?
Usually the best places have the best pipelines are almost instantaneous. As soon as I animate it, I can click a button, it exports it, and then I can go into the game and then import it quickly, at which point then I can just press another button and iterate on it and see all my changes happen. Because the faster you can remove that process of like, okay, I animated, okay, now let me export it and go through all these steps. Like I've worked on some games where like it's like 12 different steps you have to go through before it's exported, and it's a nightmare because it just takes you out of the flow of creation, and it inserts all these areas where things can go wrong and things can break, and it's a nightmare. So the best places, like you can do it in a minute or two. The worst places it can take like 20 minutes and you're like done with it. But it's getting better. Like every new console, every year, every new update of a software program, like it just keeps getting better and better.
And what's the average animator get paid?
It changes like where you live. Cost of living makes a big difference. Every year there's this magazine called Game Developer Magazine, and they put out like an annual survey type thing. And usually it says like most animators start out around between like 40 and 45 a year, and then it kind of keeps going up. If you work in Los Angeles, like it's gonna have to start out more because it's just really expensive to live out there. Like rent, in the cheap range starts at like 11, like $1,000 or more a month, and then it just goes up and up and up. But if you're working somewhere, like Wisconsin is obviously cheaper than Los Angeles. You might start out making less. And then as you get promotions, as you become a senior or a lead or a director or whatever, it can just keep going up. So, so those are all the questions. I hope you guys, I hope I gave you some good answers. I hope you had fun making your games, and I look forward to you guys making a lot more games. Have fun. Thanks a lot. Sorry, my questions are over there, and I'm recording it. Confusing. The future. I'm an idiot. All right, let's. Chris, stop. Cut.